Welcome to the Word and Journey podcast, stories that shape us and make us think and elevate us to greater states of things, or at least make us consider the state of humanity, the trajectory of humanity, and what it means to be human. We are humans, humaning in the image of God, and we have full bodies. And you'll come to understand why that's important very shortly as we delve into our show today. I'm here again with Rousseau Brassier, and we are concluding our read of the Ransom Trilogy by C.S. Lewis. Today we read, and now we talk about That Hideous Strength. Hello, Rousseau. How are you?
Urendi Maleldil. I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm awake most of the time. I'm here late, and it'll be fun. So
excited to talk about this book. This is it's such a joy to read it every time. This was my sixth time through, and every time there's just new layers that get unpacked, and I'm just buzzing with excitement.
Yes, quite a bit of buzz. This was my second time through. This was only my second time through the trilogy, and second time through this one. And I think my first time was probably back in high school. And I like to say back in high school before I knew how to read. For all that I read in high school, there's a way of thinking a little bit more carefully about things that I've started to pick up and stumble into in adulthood, especially becoming Orthodox. There's just lenses of symbolic meaning, and you start to filter everything into those, and it's really fun.
So good. Well, I still don't know how to read, which is why 95% of my reading consists of audiobooking.
That's fair. Yeah.
But I know how to
you know how to listen. Yes. So, well, yeah. And I guess, I mean, it will say more specifically what I mean there. Like, I mean, a lot of us in America, know how to see characters on a page and ascribe meaning to them because we're blessed in that way. So I suppose a little bit more what I'm thinking of is learning how to see and learning how to think and learning how to ask questions. And, and also it's a way of knowing your own self. I know you and I are speaking from within the Christian world. I'm also coming from like the counseling world, and we come to a story, we encounter something about ourselves and how we respond to it. And so every story is an encounter and a discovery in some really fun ways. So
I knew that's what you meant when you said I didn't know how to read back then, but I'm glad you
said. Yes. Cool. Okay, so That Hideous Strength. So I will briefly narrate best I can the basic plot. And yes, now we are in spoiler territory. So
definitely. If you haven't read the book, what are you doing?
Right? If you haven't read it 6 times by 36, So
good.
Yes. So briefly recapping. So the whole trilogy, because there is a way where, and you could let me know your opinion on this. I feel like this is the book that the trilogy is about in a way. And Out of the Silent Planet is book 1. Our main protagonist, Ransom, he's caught up by someone else's plans, and he ends up on the planet Malacandra, what we know as Mars. He meets the people, has an adventure, encounters the Oyarsa of the world, and learns about deep heaven and the spiritual world. Perolandra, book 2, he is sent to the planet Perolandra, to Venus, this time with more planning, more intention. He knows more what the world is and what he's getting into, what he's getting into. And they have, and so he goes there again, meets the people, has an adventure, plays a really pivotal role in that world's salvation trajectory and everything. And then, so book 3 then uh, actually doesn't center on Ransom
Mm-hmm.
as the primary protagonist. We could say there's the dual protagonists of Mark and Jane. They're a married couple living in England, and most of the story is framed through their experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And Ransom is there as very important, but you definitely wouldn't appreciate who he is or his significance or the significance of what's going on if he hadn't had the first 2 books. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that said,
I'd say he's
so
at the center of the story. He's just not in the foreground of the story.
that's a good way of thinking about it. Yeah, yeah, he definitely makes it possible. Um, so then, so Mark and Jane, when we meet them, they're a younger, kind of recently married couple. It seems like a couple years in, and already rent way out of the honeymoon phase, like not really well connected, not really not really full of love for each other, not really full of like closeness.
Mm-hmm.
And sh- uh well, how does Jane's story start? She's starting off just kind of trying to figure out like what to do with herself, and
Mm-hmm.
then um as she goes about, she ends up encountering. How does it go? I think
She,
she
she,
like
oh yeah, go.
goes looking for like her housekeeper or something, and starts encounters this like uh breadcrumb trail of people that end up leading her to Ransom.
Yeah, she wakes up from a scary dream, and she's trying to console herself. Her husband Mark is out working and is never home, and so she goes out to buy a hat. And she actually hates the type of woman who goes to console herself by buying a hat. And she finds, well, actually, she doesn't even know that that's exactly what she's doing. But then she meets Mrs. Dimble, and Mrs. Dimble was the wife of her tutor. And then, yeah, she explains some of the dream while they're spending time together, and then the Dimbles go, "Whoa, that dream sounds a little more than just a dream," because it had prophetic vision and insights into what was actually happening in time and space. Whew.
Yes, yes. There's some notes we could say about dreams coming up, but that was it. It was a dream, and it was a dream of a recently executed criminal, uh, or political someone, and
And,
it was spooky in that way.
yeah,
Alcazan, yes, not to be misconstrued with Alcatraz or Azkaban, but Alcazan, one of these intimidating sounding names.
yeah.
Yes. Uh, Meanwhile, Mark, so he's like a junior fellow at a fellowship at a university, and um, trying to climb the ladder of academia, and his story is one of he's very driven by wanting to be important, wanting to be included, and having opportunities, and so he gets recruited into ever deepening circles of his university circle, which ends up taking him like out of one fellowship like into another opportunity, and um, and then what we discover then is that in England, a lot of the attention starts over, I think it was like Bragdon Wood,
Mm-hmm.
where historically, like Merlin from the King Arthur stories was supposed to be buried there,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a whole lot of historical value to like this place for England, and we should maybe comment on like local mythologies a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a there's an organization that is led by Lord Feverstone, who is Divine, the character from Out of the Silent Planet, and they are trying to do something with humanity to like make humanity better. And meanwhile, and so Mark gets caught up with them. And meanwhile, Jane, she becomes inducted into this other group who is gathered around Ransom, who's mostly just like referred to as like the director, because he's the one who's been in contact with the Elendil and knows things, and they believe in him, they believe what his work is,
Mm-hmm.
and so then there's a lot of micro things back and forth from Mark and Jane both, like a whole lot of character development, and then a lot of the story, but both sides are looking for Merlin, the return of Merlin, and the one side to try to make him an ally, the other to make him something that they use, and very, very, very central to this is the head. It is the disembodied head of the executed criminal Alcazan, and Mark's group, the NICE, they have figured out how to animate it or make it speak. And in so doing, they have this idea: we are going to move humanity into like a greater version of itself. And
unlimited by the body, and they'll be all mind.
All minds. Yeah, mindless men, or bodiless men is what they're after. And that's where we'll make some comments about the incarnation. And what Ransom and his people know is that there are these evil forces that are trying to get to Earth, to Tholkondra, which is our world, and so they're wanting to stop that and to protect the world. And so
rather, the evil forces are already here at work under the dominion of the dark Oyarsa of Earth, namely the Bent One.
Right. Yes. So there's this looming sense throughout the book of like something's going to happen. The NICE, they think it's something wonderful, and the Ransom's crew, they think it's something terrible. And so there's this build up throughout of like what's going to happen and and everything. And so and then in the climax there's an elephant and a bear, and and the animals come to the aid again, and then there's an earthquake, and and then it kind of ends as many stories do. Almost many epics classically will end with a wedding. This one doesn't end with a wedding, but it does end up with Mark and Jane finally figuring their way out back to each other. And then we kind of like cut to black right there. It was a very tasteful ending.
Yeah, his clothes are hanging over the windowsill, and it's time
to go in. Yeah. So that's kind of a rough rendering of the story for narration purposes. There's a whole lot more like little detail as they go back and forth, which we can now you get into. But so jumping into the main story.
Great summary.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe let's start with character a little bit. Who's a character that was either like a favorite or most interesting or most confusing to you?
Merlin, as far as mystery goes, I just got the first time I listened to this story, I was just so enchanted by Arthurian lore, and come to find out C.S. Lewis was really influenced by one of the Inklings who joined, named Charles Williams, who wrote a number of novels on Britain's history and fictional stories that included Merlin, Arthur, relics, spiritism, cults, dark magic, and all these things. And I think Lewis was definitely wanting to provide a story that would be of interest to Charles Williams. So he includes Merlin. Merlin's really mysterious, and there's a big plot twist where everyone thinks Merlin is going to be joining the NICE because he has power, and we know that power is often associated with darkness, selfish purposes. But turns out Merlin actually is Christian in the old sense of the word. He's he's got pagan magic, but it was at a time before that was really before there were hard lines drawn. So I'm really intrigued by Merlin and his entrance into the story, and how he becomes the mouthpiece for the Oyarsas of Paralandra and Malacandra and Glund, and all these celestial powers come down on him in the end. So very fascinating. But Mark is the character who I think I get the most, like you said, when you read a story and you see it as a reflection of yourself. There's definitely tendencies in Mark, whether it's his passivity or his way of just seeking to, like you said, climb the ladder academically, but it's not so that he can be intelligent and use his his gifts for the good of humanity. It's to compensate for the deep sense of insecurity he has, that he's not on the inner circle, that he doesn't have deeply felt a sense of acceptance, belonging, importance. And so he is seeking that in all the wrong places, as we all do. So Mark, in all of his flaws, I see him as a mirror and a parable of caution for myself. So
A parable of caution. I'm quickly inscribing that idea because I connect with that a lot. Yes. I want to hang out a lot with Mark's character a little bit, so maybe we'll come back to that in a second.
cool. Yeah,
So maybe let's touch a little bit on like Merlin and mythology and mystery, like, a little bit,
great.
as a story point.
Mm-hmm.
So here's where here's where I do not yet aspire to the level of Richard Rollin in Universal History, because I didn't have time to do that much research. But what's interesting. Okay, so C.S. Lewis opens his preface to this book saying, "I have called this a fairy tale in the hope that no one who dislikes fantasy may be misled by the first 2 chapters into reading further and then complain of his disappointment."
Mm-hmm.
So then there's a lot of double negative there, but I think it's like the so we're thrown into this, fairy tale fantasy, epic realm, even though there is a little bit of a science fiction-y component to it. Technically science fiction in that we
Mm-hmm.
are there's a question of technology going on, and it's like a humanist, a transhumanism technology going on, but there's also a very classic fantasy story arc of, here's our characters, here's our disruption of status quo, call to action, in the, kind of rising action throughout. And for Mark in particular, there's definitely the dark night of the soul for him, where he ends up like in prison thinking he's about to die. But
Mm-hmm.
so within that realm of fantasy, and fantasy fairy tale. So this one's set in England, and it's interesting for us reading as Americans, because you get the sense England's very old,
Mm-hmm.
like very old, and with a lot of history and a lot of legend, and they maybe have a different sense of like sacred space
Mm-hmm.
or sacred geography than we do.
When they talk about even Bragdon Wood, they talk about the oaks there have been dropping leaves since before Britain was even an island, and you're just like, whoa. Imagine that. That's a long time that this
Yeah,
been growing here. Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. And maybe you can let me know what you think. I don't get I don't know that we in America have that same sense of like, this is our sacred spot,
Mhm.
this is our sacred character.
Yeah.
Um,
You're so
like
right. Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm.
different pockets of us will like reach for like, maybe like this founding father or something. Or I know in the Pacific Northwest they're all into Sasquatch, but
Yeah.
that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
But like, in the sense that there's this idea of like the Arthurian legends in general, like
Hmm.
there's very much the sense of like, no, King Arthur, like he's not just a fairy tale, like
Hmm.
um he's pivotal to who we are as a people and how we understand ourselves, and Merlin along with that, and then
Right.
and this spot is a spot where it happens. And
Hmm.
um I guess like we in the church have that through our faith, the sense of like, these saints, these are our people,
Hmm.
these places are our places. Like we have more of a sense of like the holy places where stuff happens with through that. But I don't know that we have that just as Americans.
Not really. I mean, our nation is not even 300 years old yet. And so there's not been enough time to really, there's buildings, ju- co- normal buildings in just about every country in Europe that pre-exist our existence as a nation. We're very young. So
Yeah,
you're right. I don't think there's been enough time for there to be lore and myth that's grown up here in the States.
yeah. So maybe someday, we'll see if we make it.
Hmm.
But there is this fun bit of just um the the reverence they have for these spaces.
Hmm.
I think makes a big deal. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess it's a layer of the story that maybe the Brits will appreciate more than we will.
Yeah.
But all that to say, so
Made me want to
Merlin.
go there though. It made me hungry for a place like that. Just a place that, the Bragdon Wood is so enchanted with mystery, and the tales of naiads and dryads and all these woodland creatures that come up in the Narnia stories as well. You can just imagine it's just full of full of all sorts of secrets, and it makes you want to go for a good long walk in a very old place. And part of the college's problem is there's disrepair on the wall, and they owe a bunch of money. It's going to cost a bunch of money, and so they vote to sell a chunk of the land to the NICE in the opening chapters. And the NICE, the National Institute of Coordinated Experiments, wants that land specifically because it's where supposedly Merlin's well and Merlin's burial places, and they want to get in touch with him because they know he's going to be of help with all of his knowledge from the past of sorcery and connection with the Eldila. They're expecting he's going to join their side and lead them to hasten their victory.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that I'm glad you said that. That helps me like put together the thought I was thinking. I think part of what drives me to the Merlin character is the sense that he's part of the mythology, and he's very much larger than life. And so that there's a way where here's these human characters, and you get the sense this isn't just like a normal human adventure. This is of like divine scope,
Yeah.
divine level, like um, really, really, really great magnitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And trying to think if there's a more pretty way I can say that.
Yeah.
But it's like, different than like, I know, we have our superhero movies. Those are cool, but there's not necessarily like a great scope of that all the time. Okay, sure. Like, Avengers Infinity War, there's a sense of like, we've got to save the universe and save half the people. But that also, there's a way where that gets done. That gets done a lot. So we're kind of familiar with that. But there's almost a way that there's something a little bit deeper here, because it's not just save the universe from going into non-existence. There's very much the sense of like, we need to save humans from becoming evil.
Right.
And there's a very clear sense of like good and evil beyond just what will like create and destroy life, but what will create good life instead of just corrupt life. And really notable to what you highlight the sale of Bragdon Wood. It would be, I guess the equivalent would be if like we decided like, oh yeah, we're gonna just like sell Jerusalem to Costco or someone. That and I think what we're getting into, because we could talk a little about the NICE a little bit too, is this disregard of the sacred.
Right.
The NICE, they're what do we say they were? They're the National Institute for Coordinated Experiments. So scientists trying to do things, trying
Mm-hmm.
to and everything, but in this very like humanist, materialist, we work with what we have in front of us sort of sense. And so they don't regard the spiritual world or the sacred world as real or important or worthwhile, and definitely not as authoritative.
Yeah.
And that definitely colors our approach to things.
Mm-hmm. What you were saying made me think of just like how many different things Lewis is weaving together. And this is one of the things I love about this story. It seems like everyone I talk to who has read these books has a hard time with the third one or doesn't like it. And I think some of that is just expectations. In the first two, he's been traveling, intergalactically to different planets and meeting these Oyarsa. And then the third one is based, in this college. And but what he does in this story is so wild to me that any human mind could do it. It is in some way like the Bible, like except for one dude did it, because it's pulling all of these things together, from Arthurian lore to medieval cosmology, from the biblical meta narrative, interplanetary politics, morality, the complications of marriage, metaphysics, mythology. It's just all in this story, and you're like, what if there's so many things he weaves together so masterfully, and I'm obsessed with it. It's so good.
I agree. And again, thinking back, I read this before I knew how to read. So like last time I read, like I didn't know what any of these things were that you just
Yeah,
mentioned. I mean, maybe interplanetary politics because I watched Star Trek,
yeah.
but um, but so now I loved reading it as an adult, and I
Hmm.
loved it. And once I
Yeah.
got it, yeah, I think once I got past like the first couple of chapters, I was just like riveted and like clinging into it any chance I could get.
Hmm.
Um, it's a smart story. It's thoughtful. It's not big action. There's not a lot of flashbang.
Hmm.
Um, so you have to pay attention to it.
In fact,
Um,
that's the number one gripe of McPhee throughout the story. He's like, "What are we even doing? Apart from growing some vegetables and raising some pigs, what are we even doing?" And in the end, they talk about, well, when this story is written, nobody will even mention us. And McPhee goes, "Great, we didn't do anything." And Ransom replies something to the effect of, "No, we waited patiently and were obedient." And that is actually um, harder than just, like we would think, fighting some battle and doing some amazing
mm,
work. It was about trusting all along that providence and the powers at work beyond our control were partnering with us, but our role is actually fairly minuscule, which
mm,
is exactly what Psalm 8 says. Like, when I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, what is man that you're mindful of him? What am I going to do in this
right.
cosmos that's of any significance? And so it does shrink the hubris of McPhee down a bit. And for those who know Malil, they already know I'm
Yeah.
small, insignificant, and I love that. That's what the Oyarsef Malacandra says at the end of Paralandra. He says, "Be comforted, small one, in your smallness." Like, yeah, you prevented something that generations will talk about for as long as this planet endures, but you're
Mm,
still very small, and that should be
yeah.
of comfort.
I think so, and I think that ends up showing up in Mark's story as well. Like when he stops trying to be bigger than he is and just
Mhm.
like kind of
Right.
accepts who he is, like that's his freedom.
Hmm.
And and same for us too when we can
Hmm.
be honest about like the reality of our condition as
Right.
humans, as sick, as deficient, as broken in the ways that we are, and as
Hmm.
good as holy in the image of God. But like having an accurate assessment of oneself is really the key to any sort of success.
Hmm.
But I do love this about Lewis's books though, and this shows up in I think all of the Chronicles of Narnia, where there's this like main character who in a sense becomes the vehicle by which the greater forces do their work.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, Peter, Susan, Edmund, Lucy, I mean, okay, Peter kills the wolf, but like they don't really do much. They're
Right.
mostly just like ushered through a whole bunch of things.
Right.
And then Aslan does everything and it's awesome.
Totally.
So
Did I tell you my dream about the Juxtora?
no, do tell.
Okay, only because we're on the topic of dreams, and Jane's dreams are like central to what is happening, and she rejects them. She's like, "I don't want any part of this. I want to be normal and live my normal life and write my thesis on done and all of these things." Well, I this is crazy. So I had a dream May 5th that I was at a lecture given by Malcolm Geit on J.R.R. Tolkien and just his insane medieval worldview and all of these things. And in my dream, I'm sitting there in the audience, and then Tolkien walks into stage and he sits on the stage and he's sitting there next to him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, shut up, Malcolm. Like, I love you. You're brilliant, but like, let Tolkien talk. And he doesn't. It ends. And I am familiar with the layout of the building in my dream. So after the lecture ends and everyone's leaving, I slip around this back door and I'm like, I'm going to meet Tolkien. And so I do. I see him coming out of a door and he walks out and I'm like, Professor Tolkien, such an honor to meet you. Hi, I'm Rousseau. And the first thing that comes out of my mouth in my dream is something to the effect of, I wanted to pick your brain about the old solar speech of the Hrasa in Out of the Silent Planet. And I know you're a philologist and would have some interesting insights. What do you think about old solar, and why didn't Lewis develop that language more? And as I'm rambling all these questions to Tolkien, he takes out a a page like from a notebook, and he's not even looking at me. He's just writing on this scribbling down some thoughts on a page. And he's like, I'm thinking, oh, he's going to give it to me. Well, as I finish asking my questions and trying not to sound like an idiot, he hands me this note from like a notepad, and it says juxtora at the top, ... a character on whom and from whom, and that's all I get. He's writing the definition to the word juxtora, and it's a character on whom and from whom something. But like I said, I am a slow reader. Even in my dreams, that's all I get of the definition, and I'm becoming self-conscious that I'm taking a very long time to read these few lines. And I think to myself, wait, should I just have him read it to me? Like he can audiobook his definition of the word juxtora? Because I don't know if I'm going to, I don't want to look like an idiot, like I can't read. Well, that's where the dream ends. And I wake up and immediately I'm like, whoa, I just met Tolkien in my dream. And he gave me a word, Juxstora. And then I do what any millennial in 2025 would do. I plug the dream into ChatGPT just to get an idea of how it analyzes it. And if I may, I'll pull up my note in a bit. But long story short, I went on this very long journey. ChatGPT was more just like a joke, but then it actually had some insights into juxta being beside or next to, and stora being and I didn't know this. I haven't taken classes that teach me prefixes or suffixes or anything. And so I'm like, stora has to do with something big or great. And then apparently in Norse, it means star. So it means big or great in Latin, and then star in Norse. And so next to or beside a great big star of some sort. And when you're talking about Narnia and each of these little characters, they are the juxtora. They are the one who is next to and beside the great big central star, the sun, whom everything revolves around. That's Aslan. And long story short, I was my dad passed away in May, and one night I woke up. It was actually just a few nights after I had dreamed that dream, and my dad had passed away in between those things. And as I just got out of my bed, went to pray, the word juxtora kept coming into my head. And I'm like, what is that? And then I kept thinking about John 12, where Jesus says, unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And I was thinking about, of course, that's ultimately about Jesus and how his kingdom comes through death and resurrection life and the multiplication of that life. But then it was as though that was true of my dad as well. And he became, in my mind, the juxtora. His life parallels the gospel story insofar as he stands next to and allows to happen to him and through him whatever Melildil has purposed. And so all that to say, the juxtora in my mind is now like this. I don't know. I feel like it's like a gift of a word. It helps me make sense of myself and all of these characters, that they are the character on whom and from whom all of God's purposes and plans can come as they align their hearts and their wills with his. So sorry for a very I mean, in some way it's very connected, but it's like pulled out of that story into my own story and hopefully into your story as well.
I love that so much, and it's what happens with stories. I mean, we encounter things and we understand ourselves, and it is beautiful. The idea of the juxtora, and it was making me think about God's promise to Abraham. Your descendants will be as the stars in the heaven, and it's not. That's not just talking about quantity. There's a way, like in the ancient world, like the stars were understood to be the angels,
right?
And there's a way where yes, your descendants will become like the angels, and you and your descendants, and we are his spiritual descendants, will spiritually participate in the work of God in the manner of the angels. And so there's a whole lot of layers there that are just super super beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
sorry, go for it.
Just the other interesting note about dreams, speaking of your dream, and who are talking to one of our characters here is having dreams, is thinking, whoa, so what are dreams? And we could maybe disregard a lot of Freudian stuff here, but again, in the ancient world, they understood spiritual sight to be like a sense that you have that you could like develop or not. And when you are asleep and your other senses are down, this inner sight, the Greeks would call it the nous, um, is fully unhindered. And so there was this thought of like, well, dreams are your interactions with the spiritual world
Mm.
and stuff coming to you, which was why they were given a lot of priority.
Right.
So the sense of like, yes, I'm asleep and I'm unguarded, and so thoughts are going to come to me, and I need to then seek seek wise counsel to discern them makes a lot of sense. And so
Totally.
yes,
In the
so
words of Job, God speaks, but man does not perceive. In a dream and in the vision of the night, when slumber seals the weary eyes. I was literally just listening to a story this morning at a men's group of a brother who woke up, had moved away to get out of a unhealthy lifestyle, and then had a dream that his girlfriend he had just left was pregnant, and then he woke up, went downstairs, and his dad had just had that same dream, and his dad said, in my dream, we need to call her because she's going to have an abortion. And so from a dream, they both get on the phone and call her, and she had sure enough scheduled an abortion. And his whole life story is now, been 180 from what it would have been because God intervened through a dream. And it's like, wow, he did that in the story of Christ as well. There's so many dreams from the dreams of the wise men, the dreams of Joseph, all these dreams that God uses. Can I share a poem on dreams? Actually, this is one of my favorite poems of all time.
sure,
I'll share a few lines of it. It's from
okay,
John Newton, the author of Amazing Grace. He says, when slumber seals our weary eyes, the busy fancy wakeful keeps. The scenes which then before us rise prove something in us never sleeps. As in another world we seem, a new creation of our own. All appears real, although a dream, and all familiar, though unknown. What schemes we form, what pains we take, we run, we fight, we fly, we fall. But all is ended when we wake, we scarcely then a trace recall. What mighty agents have access? What friends from heaven or foes from hell? Our minds to comfort or distress when we are sleeping, who can tell? One thing, and at least, and 'tis enough, we learn from this surprising fact. Our dreams afford sufficient proof. The soul without the flesh can act. The soul without the flesh can act. I love that line. And just like, what mighty agents have access to us in our dreams? Friendly ones from heaven, foes from hell. Who can tell?
yep.
Yeah.
So the moral of the story is be careful what you watch and consume because it matters
Mm-hmm.
greatly.
Big time.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of souls moving with our bodies, let's talk a little bit about the NICE and the head, and
Mm-hmm.
then see if we have time to talk about Jane and then Mark.
Great.
And that might give us a good resounding thing. So, okay. So when I read this before I knew how to read and didn't know anything about the world, I remember not liking this story very much, and I think because the only thing I remembered was the head,
Oh yeah.
and it was I don't want to swear here, but it was creepy as you know what. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, it
uh,
is creepy as hell, and very literally, because it is hellish powers that are actually. Am I allowed to? Oh yeah.
yeah. We're spoiling, so yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Okay. The surprise twist at the end is they think through their science and their technological discoveries they are breaking ground by keeping this severed head of a prisoner Alcazan alive. They've got all these tubes and plugs and sanitation processes that they go in before talking with this head who is calling all of the shots for what the NICE does. And only to discover in the end the people closest to the inner ring actually know it has nothing to do with the sciences. It is straight up macrobes or dark bent eldila. They call them macrobes, which is really fascinating. That microbes are things that can influence us and kill us, but macrobes are the life forces. So big, the cosmic spirits that also influence us. The macrobes are keeping this head alive, and it is just it blew my mind. And like you said, it's creepy as hell because it is hell itself that's keeping this severed head of a prisoner alive and giving orders through it.
Yeah. Well, it's a grotesquerie. Like it's
Mm.
it's this head that's got this blank expression. Like I think like the brain's exposed. It's just like foaming at the mouth,
Yeah.
like just like speaking this flat voice and just like mounted there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the juxtaposition playing with that word again
Mm-hmm.
of the head and Ransom is
Mm-hmm.
really stunning. And I think they are very much they are each other's counterparts because the NICE is using the head where we find out they're using the head as the mouthpiece for these greater forces, and
Mm-hmm.
they've constructed it on their own. Whereas Ransom is likewise the spokesperson
Mm-hmm.
for the Aldila, but he's incarnate. He
Mm-hmm.
encountered them. There's a relationship there. He's still a whole person, and so whereas the one is like creepy and corrosive, like he's very life giving. He's very he's very much Ransom is very much like how certainly in the Orthodox tradition, how we understand the saints. The saints are those who, I mean, we're all saints, but there's like a particular category of saints who have significantly purified themselves here on earth, here in the body, and so have had a closer encounter with God. And there's this lingering, very very tangible like sense to that. We can our souls are keyed into holiness. We can sense it, thousands of miles away, and we're drawn to travel to these people. But anyway, so but so in the NACE though, we could say they're very much like the people building the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
They're very much like we're not trying to bring heaven to earth
Mm-hmm.
as happened in the incarnation.
Mm-hmm.
We are trying to
Raise earth to heaven.
we're trying to like achieve the ascendancy of man on
Mm-hmm.
our own terms,
Right.
in our own way. No
Mm-hmm.
regard for the sacred. We think we can control these things.
Mm-hmm.
We think we understand the world and the spiritual world and deep space, and we're going to try to control it on our terms and use it for our profit. And um, and in that it's like you said, like we've got this head to breathe, and we've got these dark spirits, and we think we can control them, and then it ends up being jokes on them, like you can't control that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
um but it changes them to
Yeah.
be in that way of
Mm-hmm.
disregarding the sacred,
Right.
disregarding the human, and this
Seeing
really.
themselves as well, of their own God-given personalities, uniqueness. They become these mindless, robots, whereas God actually makes us truly ourselves and all whom he intended us to be, which is a fuller, richer, more sanctified, holy, beautiful version of ourselves. They want to use us and like run us down and feed on us like parasites. They empty our souls of what is truly us.
Yes. So McPhee we mentioned. So he's a fun character
Mm-hmm.
in Ransom's crew, because he's of Ransom's crew, but he hasn't fully like converted in a way. Like he hasn't fully surrendered to God or to the LDL, and so he's always he's in the role of the skeptic, and does great at that. But he has this great line when he's talking with Ransom about the head and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, "It is the beginning of what is really a new species, the chosen heads who never die. They will call it the next step in evolution, and henceforward, all the creatures that you and I call human are mere candidates for admission to the new species, or else it's slaves, perhaps it's food."
Hmm.
Uh,
So intense.
yeah, perhaps food. Wait, so I mean, which completely puts me in mind of like like the Matrix, where it's like it's the artificial intelligence, like they have taken control, and they become the new masters, and humans are incredibly devalued in that.
Yeah.
So so he hinted at incarnation, and so incarnation is central to the Christian faith, and it's like incarnation leading into like bodily resurrection. Like that's what makes our faith it.
Right.
And if those things aren't there, then we don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so this head is the complete opposite of that, where it's like we don't need the body. We can just scrap the body. The body's useless. It hinders us. All we need is mind, just
Mm-hmm.
mind, unhindered mind,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and these humans. yeah, we don't need them. We can move on. We can do better.
Yeah, organic life itself is not seen as good. Even Philostrato wants to rid the world of all matter and wants to make planets like the moon, where it's just like, everything material is incinerated, and we can set up, artificial trees that don't actually drop leaves and make waste and require raking, all of these things that are actually a good part of natural life and the natural order. They just want to do away with because
yeah, yeah. There's a way of
actually.
yeah, and it's haunting in a way. The sense of like this desire to have things like perfectly under control, nothing messy, uh, but very sterile.
Hmm.
It wouldn't create life, and again, central to all of this is like, I mean, what is the human? But the human is the living icon of Christ,
Hmm.
and like you don't mess with the icon, and in a lot of ways, that's a major part of what's going on here. Is they're just trying to dismantle the image of God in
Yeah.
a really serious way.
Yeah.
And as you're thinking about doing that in general, like in a sense, like they dehumanize themselves internally,
Right.
and just they get and so give themselves over to these dark forces.
It's so prophetic of what's happening in our own day and age, where self-mutilation in the name of liberation and progress and self-expression is actually it's like, if what the scriptures claim is true, that we are indeed God's masterpiece, his workmanship, his poema, we are finger painting on the Mona Lisa and on Starry Night if we try to do to ourselves that which God has not done to us. If we try to make ourselves in our own wishes and likeness and desires, we're actually going to be like destroying the temple of God, the masterpiece that he intended for us to be, which is so great. He doesn't want us to be all enmeshed, which I found so interesting that I believe it was Frost and Wither at one point are so close. It says that they were like leaning into each other as though their faces were about to kiss, as though they were two lovers. And yet, like in this big, intense discussion, they want an intermelding of personalities to where the individual dissolves and there's such a unity within the NICE that there's no self-expression or individuality or personalities. They are just one cohesive blob of an organism. And then they actually end up locking, and there's shrieking and screaming. And I don't know what's happening in that scene, but it sounds grotesque and demonic, whereas God wants us to be actually the most unique individual expression of the icon of Christ. And that's just such a gift, ourselves, our own individuality and
Yeah,
soul.
there's there's a podcaster that I like to follow, Jonathan Pajot of the Symbolic World, and so I'm going to give a paltry rendition of something that he says. But he talks a lot about like the balance of unity and multiplicity,
Mm.
and so this idea of like that moon scene that you described, or here's these two people like fusing them together. You could say there's like an excess of unity, and in that there's not really any life there. Multiplicity is where we become individuals,
Mm-hmm.
and there's life there. And too much of that, and we have chaos. So we need
Right.
some order, but this balance of bringing heaven to earth, bringing the unity and the multiplicity together. You get something like Ransom's crew. They kind of depict this in a way, like they're conscious of their bodies and of the earth, but also conscious of the spiritual world, and they are unified in purpose, but all with their idiosyncrasies, still kind of working together.
Yeah.
And over on the NICE side, there's there's a power structure,
Mm-hmm.
but there's not a like a cohesiveness. There's no warmth. There's no real love there. But whereas with Ransom's group, they deeply love each other, and they're
Mm-hmm.
very lively. They're very united and able to work together. So
Yeah. If only there was something within or even without the universe that showed us the goodness of unity and plurality and multiplicity, and how getting into Trinitarian theology, it's like, oh, that's at the core of who we believe God is.
right.
and of three persons, each with a unique role to play in the story of redemption and salvation, but with such a unity that they are one, and yet with such distinctness that they are three. It's
Yep. The all holy Trinity have mercy on us. Yeah. So that's the antagonist is all of those people who are in this early transhumanism movement that seems like on a trajectory to either put us like squarely like in the Matrix or make us the Borg.
Right.
So
yeah. It's interesting to me that the book starts out with the word matrimony. That's the first word in the book. I think I might have it here. Let me just pull it up and read it. Nope, I don't. I thought I did. But it begins with matrimony, which is interesting because in this third book, what's really happening is he's taking all of his ideas about masculinity and femininity from his trip to Mars, Ransom's trip to Mars, Malacandra, the martial spirit, and where he learns, to overcome his fears, and then in Venus, where the woman is being tempted, the second Eve, and there's just a beautiful femininity to that story. And now here on planet Earth, the goodness of both of those, each Mark and Jane are wanting to express their uniqueness and get validation for things that aren't really at the core of who God made them to be. Jane wants to be valued for her, just her intellectual prowess, and whereas people see her as lovely and beautiful and charming, she's like, I don't want that to be who I am. I want to be respected on serious and aesthetic grounds. And Mark, has both a heritage and all of, there's just these insecurities that keep them from living within the gift of holy matrimony, expressing their God-given selves in a way that I don't know. I don't know. Any thoughts on that? On how masculinity and femininity fit together in this story, and how each has to humble themselves in a different way to receive the gift of the other?
Yeah, I was really struck by that too. The way it starts. It starts with matrimony, starts with marriage, and it kind of traces that theme throughout. Like there's the marriage of Mark and Jane, the marriage of masculinity and femininity, the marriage of heaven and earth, and all of that going on. And when they are united, working together, they're unstoppable. But if they're at all fractured, then they're completely vulnerable and completely fall apart. And so, really conscious to become aware of, well, like, who are you? Like, which side are you on? And what are the strengths, uniqueness, the gifts of that? And again, being real with who you are, what you are. And there, the tricky thing, tricky thing in marriage in particular, not striving with your partner. Your partner's not your adversary, your partner's not your enemy. They shouldn't be. There's greater enemies and forces out there to be facing. Best to, be the best man you could be the best woman you can be. And there is a humility there, a humility tied to an acceptance of, this is who I am, this is what I need. So speaking of Jane and Mark, it was a really fun twist where here's Jane and she's having these dreams and visions, and scared of them, doesn't want them, and there's this and she's kind of cold, kind of frigid as she starts out, and she softens to it. And a major part of that, again, thinking incarnation relationship, she meets Ransom, and through him like meets all of his experiences, because he himself has been changed. And so now she enters his presence, she begins to be changed, because that's how salvation and healing works, is it's this gradual relationship. And so she becomes more open to what she can do and what she's being given, and catches a sense of the something bigger than me. She outgrows her humanism. And yeah, meanwhile, Mark, he's like, I'm the smart one. I'm the academic. I've got the opportunities. I've got the connections. And I'm getting recruited in these zones. And then it comes out because we get perspective from like the nice characters, the NICE characters, where they're like, yeah, we're basically just using Mark to get to Jane. We
Yeah.
want her. We want her gifts. Mark is
Right.
basically useless to us.
He's a pawn. Yeah.
Right. Which I love that twist so much
Mm.
because it hurts so much to be
Uh-huh.
the Mark characters of the world who are like, I don't even matter. Like
Uh-huh.
I'm so scared to be insignificant, and yet that is what I always end up being. And I was just
Right.
like, oh, that hurts someone.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting that there. So for Jane, salvation comes through. Well, actually, let me read this section here with her discussion with Ransom. He says, "You are offended by the masculine itself, the loud, interruptive, possessive thing, the golden lion, the bearded bull which breaks through hedges and scatters the little kingdoms of your primness, as the dwarfs scattered the carefully made bed. The male you could have escaped, for it exists only on the biological level. But the masculine, none of us can escape. What is above and beyond all things is so masculine that we are all feminine in relation to it. You had better agree with your adversary quickly." To which Jane replies, "You mean I shall have to become a Christian?" And he says, "It looks like it." And so there's this where it's just interesting to me that obviously God is not a biological male other than through the incarnation, but she's offended by masculinity itself, and for Mark, humility looks like at the very end of the story, repenting of his entitlement. And he goes back to Jane after seeing what an evil, corruptible, self-deceived person he is. And there's this humility where 3 times it says, how had he dared? He's just thinking over how he had just carelessly plunged into this relationship and took an advantage of her in so many ways, and he just is repenting, going, how have I dared to do that? As though this was my native garden that I just stomped through. How had I dared? And so his valuing and appreciating her beauty and femininity in a whole new way, and her subjecting herself willingly to Mark, and even to Ransom, and ultimately to God. That submission is so beautiful, and it's not something that's uniquely commanded of like females. It's like all of us need to submit. All of us. There's need to be mutual submission. Anyways, maybe a little off topic, but I found it very interesting.
Yeah. Oh, it's the character growth. There's this idea of. I think we'll initially look at submission as this terrible thing, but submission and surrender, they become really connected, and they become very, very freeing. I'm gonna read a segment from Mark's part.
Great.
So again, in his arc, so it starts off with he can't get any clear information out of the NICE about what his job is for the longest time. They're totally gaslighting him. It's really painfully awkward, obvious, and very very anxiety inducing. But as he goes, like they start having him do some shifty, shady, criminal things with regard to like journalism and the news, and he starts catching on to it. He starts asking questions, and then I think once he encounters he encounters the head, and I think that starts to really let him know like, hey, something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then he tries to leave, and then he can't leave. Especially once they figure out like they're so insistent that he bring his wife to them, and he starts to get a sense of this isn't good. And there's very much the sense of these thoughts are coming to him,
Mm-hmm.
kind of warning him about it. It's not his own brilliance, and he's not figuring this out his own. It's very much like he's being rescued slowly from within. But he comes to this point. So he's put into confinement, put into prison, into their prison. And let's see, I'll read some segments here. He says, "What a fool, a blasted, babyish, gullible fool he had been." He sat down on the floor, for his legs felt weak, as if he'd walked 25 miles. Why had he come to Belbury in the first instance? Ought not his very first interview with the deputy director to have warned him, as clearly as if the truth were shouted through a megaphone or printed on a poster in letters 6 feet high, that here was the world of plot within plot, crossing and double crossing, of lies and graft and stabbing in the back, of murder and a contemptuous guffaw for the fool who lost the game. He had a picture of himself, the odious little outsider who wanted to be an insider, the infantile gull drinking in the husky and unimportant confidences as if he were being admitted to the government of the planet. Was there no beginning to his folly? Had he been utter fool all through from the very day of his birth? Even as a schoolboy, when he had ruined his work and half broken his heart trying to get into the society called Grip, and lost his only real friend in doing so. Even as a child, fighting Myrtle, his sister, because she would go and talk to secrets with Pamela next door. He himself did not understand why all this, which was now so clear, had never previously crossed his mind. He was unaware that such thoughts had often knocked for entrance, but had always been excluded for the very good reason that if they were once entertained, it involved ripping up the whole web of his life, canceling almost every decision his will had ever made, and really beginning over again as though he were an infant. The indistinct mass of problems which would have to be faced if he admitted such thoughts, the innumerable somethings about which something would have to be done, had deterred him from ever raising these questions.
Wow.
What had now taken the blinkers off was the fact that nothing could be done. They were going to hang him. His story was at an end. There was no harm in ripping up the web now, for he was not going to use it anymore. There was no bill to be paid in the shape of arduous decision and reconstruction. For truth, it was a result of the approach of death, which the deputy director and Professor Frost had possibly not foreseen. So I love this. So within the last year, I've undertaken my own recovery sobriety in a more serious level, and so I've been hanging out with the 12-step people a lot and finding them incredibly valuable and real, really wonderful people in a lot of ways. So this is Mark's step one. This is his point where he realizes, my life has become unmanageable and I am powerless to do anything. And which will directly lead into the step two, and I need someone bigger than me to get me out. And I love this. I was almost tearing up, again, reading this. It was just yes, that surrender move where I realized I just can't. There's nothing I can do. And I have been a fool and an idiot and I missed all of these things. And that's the freedom moment, that moment where, the kernel goes in the ground and dies. It has to die if there's going to be life and healing. And this is just such a beautiful depiction of that moment, and so painful, so scary. And there's so much grief that goes into it because you realize, I failed. But then
no, go for it.
But then he can be be rescued. He can actually change from here. So
it's not until he's at the very end of himself, at the very rock bottom end of his rope, that he becomes open to the idea of even God and Christ. He begins thinking about eternal things and what really matters in the face of death. And I think that's so interesting that the Proverbs say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but nobody begins to fear the Lord unless they fear death. And at least that was my experience, I should say, that I went to church and God was just kind of like this assumed entity, but in the face of death, that's what brought, eternity to my mind and my accountability for my actions. If there really is a judgment beyond the grave, it got me thinking sober-mindedly. And so for Mark, it's interesting that that's where his conversion happens as well. Maybe not even like a spiritual conversion to Christianity, but he chooses not to trample on the icon of Christ, a little wooden painting or crucifix where that's part of the objectivity room, which is this room that is so weird and distorted and bent. And it teaches you that there really is nothing good or beautiful or sacred in the world. You have to disregard all of those things that you may find appealing and your opinions about things. All of your subjective experiences are nullified in the objective room. And the final test is he has to trample on Christ, and he won't do it because he has this moment of realizing, if I do, he's like, he ends up saying, it's all bloody nonsense and I'm damned if I do any such thing. He sees Christ as a possible ally against the bent and crooked, because again, juxtaposition, as he's in this objective room where there's no patterns, there's nothing that is aesthetically beautiful. It says that he realizes what has always been there all along is its opposite, normality, in which there is beauty, predictability, and all of these things that are actually a part of God's good, well-ordered world. Fractured and broken as it may be, it's still beautiful compared to this room where objectivity and all of your subjective opinions and feelings don't matter. And so he chooses the side of like, okay, I'm actually going to go with the straight as opposed to the bent and crooked. And Christ he sees as a possible ally against the fight, against his internal fight with evil. And I think it's just so interesting because he says it's not even that Christ, he doesn't come to a sense of like, oh, he died for my sins and I need to repent and put my trust in him. He just sees, oh, this is what the bent, crooked Belbury of his day did to Jesus. So he's in the same position as me, helpless in the hands of evil, crooked people who will stop at nothing to pervert the whole world. And Christ was subjected to that same torture and agony that Mark is going through. And so he goes, I'm actually going to not trample on him.
Mhm.
Not because he converts to Christianity necessarily, but because he sees Christ as a friend and an ally. So I thought that was really interesting.
It was really interesting, really tasteful, and yes, it's not kind of traditional like altar call. I say particular prayer. It's definitely not sacramental baptism, but it's still that turning moment, and you can see where, if we were to follow Mark another 5-10 years,
Mm-hmm.
very likely he would be
Mm-hmm.
he would be more conventionally Christian in that way, but he's been illumined in a
Mm-hmm.
way, and he
Right.
can see things now, and that seed of something now shifts his trajectory,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that really quickly, it sets them at odds with the NICE for sure,
Mm-hmm.
and now gives them the potential to begin to see more, to begin to understand more, and it's just, again, the way that God is always working. And we say, yeah, we know for sure, like here's some places where we know he is for sure. We know for sure he's in the church, uh, you know, in things like that. But we know he's other places too, and we can't control or predict those. And just because
Mm-hmm.
God goes out and finds people, and
Yep.
he saves people, and
Even in dreams. Yeah.
even in dreams, yeah, it's
Mhm.
great. So
One thing that just bears mentioning is all the while towards the later part of the book, after Mark has tried to escape from the NICE, he's been blackmailed for the murder of Hengist, and they bring him into prison. He finds out he's in Belbury, the NICE's inner workings, and they put him in a room with what the NICE believes to be Merlin, this man who's dressed in, he was found naked in the woods and long beard. It turns out to be just a transient vagabond sojourner who has who thinks that foreigners have invaded because they keep bringing in people to speak to him in Latin and all these old languages. And the tramp, he's called, and is put in the same room as Mark. And they give Mark the assignment, hey, we're going to give you one last chance to be restored into our good graces and join the real inner circle, which is what Mark has always wanted. But then he's put in this room with this vagabond who continually gestures to him and makes these hilarious, outlandish statements and tries to communicate through a number of ways that Mark doesn't understand. But he thinks that he's like in a prison camp, and Mark, he is in some sense. But my favorite part is that at the end, it says, each perhaps only understood an eighth part of what the other said, but a kind of intimacy grew between them. Mark never noticed until years later that here, where there was no room for vanity and no more power or security than of children playing in a giant's kitchen, he had unawares become a member of a circle as secret and as strongly fenced against outsiders as any that he had ever dreamed of. I think that is so clever, that what he always wanted to be on the inner circle is actually happening through this witless tramp who the NICE supposes to be Merlin. And they've got these
Yeah.
secrets because every time they come in, the tramp is silent and they think he's Merlin. And then the real Merlin comes in and puts a spell on the tramp so that he uses the tramp as a mouthpiece to do all of these things that ends up leading to NICE's destruction. But it's
Right.
it's fantastic.
I love that part so much, where it's like, yeah, Mark does finally get what he's looking for, but in completely unexpected ways.
Yeah.
It's completely turned on its head.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no pride, no vanity, you
Yeah.
know. So that I love that so much.
Like children, playing. And that's for
Right.
me, I think why, I think that's why Jesus elevates children and says, that's what the kingdom of heaven looks like. There's no posturing. There's no facades. There's no, grandiose sense of accomplishment of I earned my place. Your kids are just themselves, for better or worse. You're always going to get, a
Yeah.
kid. It's not until later that we learn to mask our true selves. A kid will tell you if you suck at something, they'll just say it like it is, and it's that honesty.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. I think so. So speaking of like K characters, so it bears mention to mention Mr. Multitude.
I was thinking that as
Yeah, a
well.
little bit, yeah. So Mr. Multitude is actually a bear, like a bear.
The last
Uh,
7 great bears of Logos.
yeah. Who has been uh sanctified in a way.
Hmm.
Which again, which happens. Like you read the lives of the saints, and lots of them, because of the peace and the holiness within them, like were, a lot of animals were really fond of them, and so very famously, Saint Seraphim of Sarov like befriended a bear, like
Hmm.
a wild bear in the woods, and he was just Saint Seraphim and the bear.
So good.
Yeah, but anyway, so Mr. Multitude's a bear. He's just like in the house, and there's a bunch of other animals too, and
Hmm.
then there's a way where Mr. Multitude and his bear like innocence, and there's a short section where Lewis kind of gets into the bear's head and mentality, and it's just very primitive, very childlike, very innocent.
It's really
If I followed right, I believe Mr. Multitude got the honor of being the one to actually dispatch the head, and I think he might have just like eaten it or something. So
Yeah. It was prophesied by Merlin. The Dimbles are together one night after they've met Merlin, and Dr. Dimble says to his wife, it was prophesied of Mr. Bultitude that he would do the greatest act that has ever been done by a bear in Britain in the last 10 centuries. And yeah, exactly. At the very end of the story, it is Mr. Bultitude who comes in and rips to shred the head. And there's another character that he eats. And
yeah,
one of the chief members of the NICE. It's fantastic.
yeah, so good.
Oh, and you talked about Babel, which is earlier, which is exactly like what the book begins with. That hideous strength comes from a quotation about the shadow of the Tower of Babel and its hideous strength, and that's exactly what has come to pass in the NICE with all of their scientific breakthrough and worship and partnership with these dark Eldila. In the end, Merlin casts a spell on them where their language is twisted and confounded, like with Babel, because they've been trying to elevate humanity to the place of divinity. And rather than receiving that as a free gift by God's grace through the incarnation, they try to achieve it and earn it through scientific means. And it ends up leading to utter confusion and utter destruction. And the Tower of Babel collapses in on all of them.
It really does. It would have been a great like Quentin Tarantino scene. Just the way that it plays out. It's very much like they can't speak to each other. There's confusion, there's mayhem, and they basically all like kill each other in different ways.
One of the
And then
gnarliest scenes in the world. I mean, every time I hear it, I just am dumbfounded. It's so
yeah,
great.
yeah. So yeah, that scene like elevates us to not a kid's book
Hmm.
in that way. But yeah, yeah. They're
I
they're they're
see movies at some point. I mean,
Oh my
hopefully they do
goodness.
it right, but I mean,
Right.
I have trust issues. When I found out they're casting a woman for Aslan's voice, I'm like, come on, the hero's already a female.
I
Lucy, what are
know.
we doing? But
Yeah,
hopefully, if they do these, they'll
I know.
make better
Yeah,
decisions.
you would hope. You would hope, but oh goodness.
Sorry to start talking about that.
No, I'm up there with you. So, uh, yeah, I love that about the range of characters. Speaking of the animals here, animals in Narnia, in kids, the way that Lewis brings together such a wide swath of characters. Like there's humans, there's angels, there's animals. It's
All of creation.
all of creation is part of this, and it's masterful.
Yeah.
So I would say yes. I would advocate for this trilogy being read by everyone in high school, but then again, at least once a decade,
Yeah.
as you learn more and get to see the world more, and it's very enriching. And and again, especially as now our world is flirting and courting with AI, and who
Right.
knows what that is or where that will take us. This story might be a really good reminder for us to like slow down and be like, hey,
Uh-huh.
let's stay in our bodies a
Yeah.
little longer.
For sure. I love this book so much. I ended up turning it into a game for my I have a group called Clive's Concord that I'm a part of, and it's 12 of us that meet monthly to read and discuss sometimes a chapter, sometimes a few chapters from Lewis's books. And I created a game where each of them I was the game master, and then there was Merlin, and then there were 5 members of St. Anne's Company, or Ransom's Company, and then 5 members of the NICE, and they had to deceive each other. And the NICE were being deceptive, and Ransom's Trilogy had to find out who they were. Like, I just whispered at the beginning of the game which character each person was, so that there was no evidence that they were that person. And no one could like trace or prove. It was so fun. And in the end, one of the NICE people had infiltrated Ransom's company and totally convinced all of them that he was indeed Jane, and then backstabbed them all at the very end, awoke Merlin, and won the game. So that didn't turn out like a storybook ending for Clive's Concord, but
Oh, that's so great.
it was awesome.
Yeah.
Shout out to Coy. Well done. MVP.
Nice job, Quaid. Cool. Well, I believe that is our course. And unlike Ransom, we will not be returning to Deep Heaven to be in Paralandra, but we will be returning to our respective vocations and callings for the day, and who knows how long. But thank you, listener, for checking with us. Hopefully you've been able to read the books, or you will shortly read the books, so you'll know what we're talking about. And yeah, it's been great. Thank you, Russo, for your time and for inspiring me to greater feats of reading and pondering and praying. And it has been edifying for my soul.
Absolutely. If I could, just encourage every listener out there, as you read, reread, listen to the Ransom Trilogy, the Cosmic Trilogy, the Space Trilogy, I would suggest get out under the heavens and look up at the stars, at the heavenly hosts. Get to get familiar with the cosmology that you live in. That's one thing that for me has just been so helpful. I used to believe in outer space, I say, but I don't anymore. When I was a child, when I became a child, I put away grown-up things, and now I don't believe in outer space. I believe in deep heaven and in the God of the heavenly hosts. And so Orindi Maleldil, get out there and be under the stars and see how minuscule you are and how important you are, all in one.
Yes. Touch the grass, see the stars, see your smallness, and perceive the greatness of God, and keep reading books.
Yep.
All right. Well, we will be back at an undisclosed time with another story. It might be Dostoevsky, and I think it will be good.
Sign me up if that's the case.
All right. We'll do it. We'll talk to y'all soon.
Blessings.